The first sound would not be an alarm clock or the soft buzz of a phone against a wooden bedside table. It would be breath, your own, sharp and visible in the cold morning air, followed by a distant crack that might be a branch or might be something with teeth. Before your eyes even open, the ground beneath you would already be telling a story your modern body has never learned to read. It is hard, uneven, faintly damp, and carries the memory of the night's chill like a stubborn guest that refuses to leave. You do not wake in a bed. You wake inside a problem.
The smell comes next. Smoke, old animal fat, damp soil, the faint sweetness of crushed grass, and something sour that suggests yesterday's food was not entirely fresh. There is no ceiling fan humming, no insulated wall buffering the wind. The air itself moves as it wishes, slipping through whatever shelter exists. Perhaps a low rock overhang, perhaps a hide stretched across a bent frame of branches. Even before you sit up, you understand something without needing language. Comfort is not guaranteed here, not even for the first minute of the day. Your body instinctively reaches for something familiar, a blanket, a switch, a phone. Instead, your hand touches rough animal hide. It is stiff in places where it dried too quickly, greasy in others where fat remains trapped in the fibers. You feel grit pressed into your skin. Your shoulder aches from the ground. Your neck is stiff because the concept of a pillow has not yet entered the world in any meaningful way. You sit up.
The light is pale and low, filtering through smoke that has settled overnight. The fire is no longer a lively presence, just embers glowing like tired eyes. Around you, other figures shift. No one stretches luxuriously. Movement is deliberate, economical. Each motion has purpose, because energy, here, is not something you casually spend. You realize very quickly that you are cold in a way modern cold rarely achieves. This is not the brief discomfort between your front door and a heated car. This cold has weight. It sits in your bones and waits to see whether you will earn warmth. Could you live here for a full day? The question sounds simple until you notice that even standing up requires negotiation. Your feet are bare or wrapped poorly in something that once belonged to an animal. The ground outside is uneven, stones, roots, damp soil. You step carefully, already feeling how soft modern life has made your skin. Every small sharp edge presses upward, like a reminder that shoes are one of humanity's quiet miracles.
The morning routine does not include brushing teeth or checking messages. It begins with the fire, because without fire, the day starts at a disadvantage that can become dangerous before midday. Someone kneels beside the embers and begins coaxing life back into them. There is no lighter, no match, only dry fibers, patient breath, and a practiced understanding of how heat moves through fragile material. If you have never done this before, your instinct is to blow too hard. The ember dims. A few sparks vanish. Someone nearby makes a short, disapproving sound. Not cruel, but efficient. Mistakes here are not philosophical. They cost time. And time can cost calories, and calories are not guaranteed. Eventually, with slow breath and careful feeding of tinder, a thin thread of smoke thickens. A flicker appears. The first small flame is greeted not with celebration, but with immediate work, more fuel, slightly thicker twigs, a protective arrangement that shields it from wind. Fire is not decoration. Fire is survival center.
As warmth begins to spread, you notice how people position themselves. No one crowds too close for comfort. Space is shared but negotiated without speech. Hands extend toward heat, then withdraw, making room for others. The group moves like individuals who have practiced existing together without needing constant explanation. Hunger arrives quickly. It is not the gentle suggestion of breakfast. It is a hollow insistence that reminds you you did not go to sleep after a large dinner. There is no cereal box waiting, no refrigerator humming nearby. Food, if it exists, must be accounted for. Someone brings a bundle, roots perhaps, or leftover meat dried near the fire. The smell is strong, not spoiled exactly, but intense. Preservation here does not create mild flavors. If you are used to modern textures, your first bite would be shocking. Tough fibers resist your teeth. Smoke has penetrated deeply. Fat coats your tongue in a way you cannot rinse away with orange juice.
But your body, already cold and working harder than usual, begins accepting what it is given. You chew longer than you expected. Eating is not a passive activity, it is labor. There is no scrolling while chewing, no distraction. Every bite is intentional because food is limited, and each piece represents effort, hours of tracking, digging, or carrying. You begin to understand something unsettling. Breakfast is not guaranteed tomorrow. As the light grows stronger, the group prepares to move. Staying in one place too long is rarely ideal, unless resources are abundant. Even if this shelter is temporary and safe, the day demands action. Water must be found or carried. Edible plants must be located. Signs of animals must be read. If you are asked to come along, your first challenge is simply walking.
Modern terrain, pavement, tile, smooth flooring, has trained your stride to expect predictability. Here, every step requires attention. Stones shift, roots catch your toes, mud slightly at your heels. Within minutes, muscles you rarely notice begin to complain. The pace is not fast, but it is steady. There is no casual wandering. Eyes scan constantly. Ground, horizon, tree line. Conversation, if it occurs, is brief and functional. Sound carries. Sound matters. You try to imitate how others move, placing your feet carefully, distributing weight quietly. Even so, you snap a twig. The sound is small, but it feels enormous. No one panics, but you notice subtle changes. Heads turn, listening. The forest does not answer immediately. That silence is information. You begin to realize that noise is a kind of vulnerability. After some time, minutes, or perhaps an hour measured only by the sun's position, you reach a patch of ground where someone kneels and begins digging with a simple tool. It might be a shaped stick hardened by fire, or a piece of bone.
The soil yields slowly. You are invited, perhaps with a gesture, to try. Digging without a metal shovel is humbling. The earth resists, roots tangle. Your hands become dirty quickly, nails packing with soil. The tool is effective but requires rhythm. When something finally emerges, a root, pale and knotted, it does not look like much. But it matters. Each small food source is a piece of the day's survival. You might feel the urge to ask how it tastes, how it will be prepared, whether it is safe. Instead, you watch how experienced hands examine it, checking texture, smell, firmness. Knowledge here is stored in memory, not books. As the morning continues, your body begins to sweat despite the cool air. Layers are adjusted, perhaps loosening the hide around your shoulders. Sweat itself becomes something to manage. Too much moisture, and later cold becomes more dangerous. Modern life rarely forces you to think of your own perspiration as a strategic variable. Time passes without clocks. The sun's position, shadows, and instinct guide decisions. When to move, when to pause, when to drink from carried water or a nearby stream. If water is found, it is not taken for granted. You kneel, cupping your hands. The water is cold enough to sting your teeth. You might hesitate. Modern instincts about filtration and safety whisper warnings. Yet here, people have long learned which sources are reliable. Still, risk is never zero. Every sip is a calculated trust in experience. By midday, fatigue begins to accumulate. Not exhaustion exactly, but a steady drain. You have walked more uneven ground in a few hours than you might normally cover in days. You have carried items, wood, roots, perhaps stones. Your shoulders ache in unfamiliar patterns. There is no scheduled lunch break. Instead, the group pauses where resources or safety allow. A small amount of food is shared again, perhaps dried meat softened briefly near a rekindled flame. Sitting on the ground, you feel how your hips and knees protest. Posture is different here, squatting, crouching, shifting weight. There are no chairs designed to support you.
Flies might appear, persistent but not overwhelming. The air carries distant bird calls that others seem to interpret subconsciously. You begin noticing how often experienced individuals pause to listen. Listening is constant. In modern life, silence is often background. Here, silence is data. At some point, attention shifts towards signs of animals. Tracks in soft soil, broken vegetation, droppings that indicate how recently something passed through. To you, these marks are random. To them, they are sentences.
You try to see what they see, the depth of a print, the direction of crushed grass. It is like being illiterate in a world where every surface is covered in writing. If a hunt is attempted, it is not cinematic. It is patient. Movement slows further. Breathing becomes controlled. If you are included at all, your role is likely to stay back, observe, and avoid making noise. Your heartbeat feels loud. Minutes stretch. Sometimes nothing happens. Often nothing happens. Success is uncertain. If an animal is taken, the moment is not triumphant in the modern emotional sense. It is practical, immediate. Work begins quickly, processing, dividing, carrying. If no animal appears, the day continues without complaint. There is no guarantee that effort equals reward. By afternoon, the sun begins its gradual descent. Light changes color. The urgency subtly increases. Returning to shelter before darkness is not optional. As you walk back, carrying what has been gathered, fatigue deepens into something heavier. Your feet are sore. Small cuts you barely noticed earlier now sting. You become aware of thirst more frequently. Your stomach is not full, but it is quiet enough. When the shelter, or temporary camp, comes back into view, relief arrives more strongly than you expected. The fire must be rebuilt again. Wood gathered earlier is arranged carefully. Sparks coaxed, flames encouraged. Smoke rises, drifting through the structure. Your eyes water slightly, but you begin to understand why smoke is tolerated. It keeps insects at a distance, preserves meat, signals presence. Evening tasks continue without pause. Food must be prepared, roasted, dried, cut into manageable portions. Tools might be adjusted or repaired, stone edges checked, bindings tightened. You watch someone strike stone against stone, producing flakes sharper than any kitchen knife you own. The precision is practiced, economical. Nothing is wasted casually. As darkness thickens, the world beyond the fire's glow becomes unknowable. Modern darkness is diluted by streetlights, distant buildings, glowing screens. This darkness is absolute. Beyond a few meters, shapes dissolve. Sound becomes sharper. A distant rustle carries weight. The fire is both warmth and boundary. You sit close enough to feel heat on your shins. The sky above, if visible, reveals stars in overwhelming numbers. Without light pollution, the night is crowded with distant points. It is beautiful, but also humbling in a way that emphasizes how small your circle of safety truly is. Conversation, if it occurs, is quieter now. Energy must be conserved. Your body begins craving sleep earlier than usual. Without artificial light, circadian rhythm shifts naturally. But sleeping is not entirely restful. The ground is still hard. The temperature drops. You adjust position repeatedly, seeking warmth. Someone adds fuel to the fire periodically through the night. You wake more than once, listening without meaning to. A distant animal call echoes. Your heart rate increases automatically. Then, silence returns. Could you survive this for one day? Physically, perhaps. Comfortably, almost certainly not. By the time your eyes open again, if you have slept at all, you realize how many small systems modern life quietly handles for you. Temperature regulation,
Food storage, sanitation, lighting, security. In the Stone Age, each of these is an ongoing task. Even something as simple as relieving yourself requires awareness, distance from water sources, from sleeping areas. Hygiene is different. Hands are wiped on grass, rinsed in cold water. There is no soap with antibacterial claims. Yet,
People survive because habits, cultural knowledge, reduce risk. You notice how waste is managed away from camp, how food scraps are handled carefully. Even without modern chemistry, patterns exist that limit danger. Your own body, however, is already showing strain. Muscles sore, small blisters forming, skin irritated from constant contact with rough materials. You are also mentally tired in a way that differs from office fatigue. Here, attention cannot drift. Every sound, every step, every task requires awareness. There is no passive moment. Even resting includes listening.
At some point, you realize that the greatest challenge is not hunger or cold alone. It is uncertainty. Modern life is built on predictability, scheduled meals, controlled climate, locked doors. In this world, every day begins without guarantee. Will food be found? Will weather shift? Will an injury occur? A twisted ankle here is not an inconvenience. It can become a serious threat. You test your footing more carefully than ever before. You begin appreciating how knowledge is distributed among the group. One person recognizes edible plants, another reads animal movement, another maintains tools. Survival is not individual heroism, it is collective competence. If you were alone, your chances would drop sharply. Even socially, dynamics are different. Communication relies heavily on gesture, tone, shared experience. There is little room for extended abstract discussion. Most energy is directed toward immediate needs. You notice how conflict, if it appears, is brief. Lingering disputes cost time and attention.
Cooperation is not idealistic, it is practical. As the second morning begins to hint at arrival, your body feels older than it did yesterday. You have survived perhaps one full cycle. You have eaten little by modern standards. You have slept poorly. You have worked continuously. And yet, you are still here. The question shifts slightly. Could you live here for a week, a month, a lifetime? The Stone Age was not a single uniform environment. Some regions were abundant, rivers rich with fish, forests full of edible plants. Others were harsh, cold plains, scarce resources. In favorable conditions, daily life still required constant effort, but offered moments of relative ease. In harsher climates, survival margins were razor thin. Your modern immune system, accustomed to sanitized environments, might struggle with pathogens present in untreated water or raw materials. Small infections could escalate.
A minor cut from a stone edge could become dangerous without proper cleaning. You begin noticing how often experienced individuals avoid unnecessary risks. Hands are positioned carefully when cutting, feet placed deliberately near sharp rocks. Energy is conserved because recovery options are limited. You also realize that physical strength alone is not enough. Skill matters more. A smaller individual with deep knowledge of the landscape is more valuable than a stronger person who wastes effort. Knowledge here is inheritance. It is passed through observation and repetition. Children would grow up learning which berries are safe, which tracks belong to which animals. You, arriving suddenly, lack that library. Even identifying a safe sleeping location requires experience, elevation, drainage, wind direction. You begin to understand how much of modern competence is specialized and narrow. You may know how to navigate software interfaces, manage schedules, operate complex machines. None of that helps you choose the right branch for kindling. None of it tells you which plant root contains calories and which contains toxins. Time feels different.
Without clocks, the day stretches and compresses according to light and necessity. You might think hours have passed when only minutes have, or discover that the sun has already dropped lower than expected. Fatigue distorts perception. Hunger sharpens senses. Cold narrows focus. Yet there are moments, brief, unexpected, where stillness exists. Watching smoke drift upward, hearing wind move through tall grass, feeling warmth spread slowly from the fire into stiff fingers. These moments are not leisure in the modern sense. They are pauses between essential tasks. If you imagine spending many days here, your body would eventually adapt somewhat. Calluses would form, muscles would strengthen in functional patterns. Sleep might become deeper despite the ground. Your senses might sharpen, hearing subtle movement, noticing changes in scent. But adaptation requires time you do not initially have. The first days are the most dangerous.
Injuries are more likely, mistakes more frequent. Your modern expectations, immediate comfort, guaranteed food, would need to be unlearned. Even emotionally, the experience would shift your priorities. A successful fire start would feel like an accomplishment. Finding a patch of edible plants would bring relief disproportionate to their size. Rain clouds approaching would trigger planning rather than annoyance. Weather is not background, it is an active participant. If rain begins, everything changes. Ground becomes slippery. Fire maintenance becomes difficult. Clothing, animal hides, grow heavy and cold. Shelter must be reinforced. You discover quickly how little separation exists between you and the environment. Modern buildings create barriers. Here, barriers are temporary. Wind finds openings. Water seeps through. Temperature fluctuates rapidly. As evening falls again, if you have somehow persisted, you notice how your sense of accomplishment is measured differently. You did not complete emails. You did not check notifications. You maintained warmth. You ate. You remained uninjured. You contributed, even slightly, to group effort. These are enough. The simplicity is deceptive because each achievement required continuous work. If someone asked you at the end of that day whether you could survive one more, your answer would likely depend less on physical strength and more on humility. Could you accept discomfort as normal? Could you learn quickly from others? Could you move carefully, speak sparingly, observe constantly? The Stone Age was not a place of constant misery, nor was it a romantic wilderness paradise. It was a world where survival occupied most waking hours. Joy existed, shared food, successful hunts, warmth during cold nights, but it was woven into effort.
For a modern person dropped suddenly into that environment, the greatest shock would not be danger alone. It would be the absence of guarantees. No guaranteed breakfast, no guaranteed safety after dark, no guaranteed recovery from injury. And yet, humans lived there, not just survived briefly, but built cultures, relationships, traditions. If you lasted one day, you would likely end it exhausted, sore, and deeply aware of how many invisible systems modern life provides. You might also carry back something unexpected, a sharpened sense of how fragile comfort truly is, a quiet respect for the knowledge required to turn stone, wood, fire, and memory into a functioning life. Long after the first shock of waking on hard ground fades, another realization begins to settle in with a quiet persistence. Nothing around you is passive. Every object, every sound, every shadow has consequence. Even something as simple as the direction of the wind becomes a piece of information your body starts to track without being told. By the time the sun has climbed higher, the air carries warmth, but not comfort in the modern sense. Heat here is uneven. One moment your shoulders feel pleasantly warm, the next a moving breeze cools the sweat on your back fast enough to make you shiver. Clothing is not layered for fashion or optimized insulation. A hide shifts when you move, and that shift changes how your body manages temperature. If you were dropped into this day without preparation, your mind would constantly attempt to assign modern meaning to unfamiliar sensations. You might mistake ordinary forest sounds for immediate danger, or worse, ignore something that actually matters. A distant branch snapping could be nothing more than wood settling after the night's moisture evaporates. It could also be an animal moving cautiously. The difficulty is not knowing which interpretation is correct. The people around you do not react dramatically to every noise. Instead, they seem to file sounds away, comparing them against memory. Their awareness is continuous, but not panicked. You would notice how often they pause mid-movement, head tilted slightly, as if listening to something too quiet for you to detect. Your own breathing, louder than you expect, becomes something you try to control. Even standing still feels like an active task. Your muscles never fully relax
because the ground itself demands micro-adjustments to maintain balance. At some point during the day, the need for more than gathered roots becomes clear. Calories from plants are helpful but limited. Protein and fat are not luxuries, they are necessary fuel. The group may split into smaller units, some continuing to forage, others tracking signs that suggest animals have passed recently.
If you follow those who track, you begin to understand how movement transforms. Walking becomes deliberate placement rather than casual forward motion. Each footfall is chosen to avoid dry leaves, loose stones, or brittle twigs. Your body instinctively wants to move at a consistent rhythm, but here, rhythm is constantly interrupted. You may crouch for long periods. Your legs begin to tremble slightly, unused to sustained low posture without support. Your knees feel pressure that would normally be relieved by sitting in a chair. Yet no one around you seems eager to stand upright unless necessary. Lower profiles mean less visibility. The forest smells different at ground level. Damp soil, decaying leaves, faint traces of animal scent carried on shifting air. Experienced individuals might pause to examine a patch of earth where impressions are barely visible. You see only irregular shapes. They see direction, speed, and perhaps even how long ago the animal passed.
Time stretches during tracking in a way that feels almost unreal. You are not chasing at full speed. You are following, reading, predicting. It is less like pursuit and more like conversation with something that is not present. Your stomach reminds you periodically that you have not eaten enough. Hunger here does not spike dramatically and then fade after a snack. It lingers as a steady background signal. If the trail disappears, there is no frustration expressed in words. Instead, there is a shift. Attention spreads outward again. New signs are sought. Effort is redirected. The absence of guaranteed success is perhaps the most psychologically exhausting part. Modern tasks often have defined outcomes. Here, effort can dissolve into nothing. Eventually, whether the hunt yields anything or not, movement resumes back toward a familiar area. On the way, additional resources are gathered whenever possible. Branches suitable for tools, bark that can be used for cordage, stones that fracture predictably.
You might pick up a stone without understanding why it matters, only to see someone else examine its grain carefully before deciding whether to keep it. Material selection is knowledge layered over generations. Not every rock is useful. The wrong one shatters unpredictably or dulls quickly. When someone demonstrates shaping stone, the process is far more controlled than the chaotic image often imagined. A strike is placed at a precise angle. A thin flake shears away. The resulting edge is sharp enough to slice through hide or plant fibers. If you attempt it, your first strikes are likely clumsy. The stone may refuse to fracture, or it may break in an unusable way. Each mistake costs material that cannot be easily replaced. Your hands begin to show evidence of the day's work. Small abrasions, dirt ground into skin, sweat drying and leaving a faint layer of salt. By mid-afternoon, fatigue settles into your shoulders like weight. Carrying even modest bundles of wood or gathered food begins to feel heavier than expected. Modern life rarely asks you to transport all necessary resources by hand over uneven terrain. You might notice how frequently the group pauses briefly, not to rest completely, but to redistribute loads. Burdens shift between individuals without discussion. Efficiency is social. Water becomes a recurring priority. If the group is near a reliable source, containers, perhaps made from hide or natural vessels, are filled carefully. If no container exists for you, you rely on cupped hands again. The act of drinking is never entirely casual. Eyes scan while you kneel. Ears remain attentive. Vulnerability while bent near water is an understood risk. As the day continues, the light subtly changes. Shadows lengthen. Colors warm. Your body begins to anticipate the coming cold even before temperature drops. You feel urgency not as panic, but as a steady push toward preparation. Returning to camp is not simply walking back. It is an opportunity to gather additional fuel.
Firewood collected earlier may not last through the night, especially if temperatures fall sharply. You help carry branches. The weight presses into your forearms. Bark scrapes your skin. Once back at the shelter area, the routine of maintaining fire begins again with practiced efficiency. Embers are coaxed, new fuel added gradually. Too much wood too quickly suffocates flame. Too little allows heat to fade. Smoke curls upward, clinging to hair, clothing, and skin. The smell becomes part of you. It is not unpleasant in context. It is protective. Insects avoid dense smoke. Predators may interpret it as human presence. As evening work continues, food preparation becomes the central focus. If meat was acquired earlier, it must be processed before darkness deepens too much. Cutting, separating usable portions, setting pieces near heat to begin drying. The smell of roasting fat fills the air, stronger than anything you are used to in a controlled kitchen. Your hunger sharpens immediately. Eating, when it happens, is both relief and necessity. Portions are not excessive. Each piece consumed is measured against what must remain for later.
You notice how carefully bones are handled. Marrow is valuable. Nothing edible is discarded casually. If only plant foods were gathered, they are prepared in ways that maximize digestibility, roasted, pounded, or softened with heat. Raw consumption is sometimes possible, but cooking often unlocks more energy. Your teeth ache slightly from chewing tough fibers. Your jaw grows tired. As darkness thickens, the psychological boundary created by fire becomes more pronounced. Beyond the glow, shapes blur into blackness. Your ears begin compensating for limited vision. Every rustle carries weight. You might hear distant howls or the low call of something moving across the landscape. Even if the sound is far away, your body reacts instinctively. Muscles tense, heart rate increases. No one around you panics. Instead, someone adds another piece of wood to the fire. Light is security. You begin to understand why maintaining flame through the night is worth the effort. The fire is not only warmth, it is a signal that this small circle is occupied. Sleep approaches differently now. Without artificial light, your body's fatigue aligns with darkness. But lying down does not guarantee rest. The ground remains uneven. You adjust your position repeatedly. A stone presses into your hip. You shift only to feel a root under your shoulder. Temperature drops further. You pull the hide closer around you, noticing how quickly exposed skin cools. Sleep comes in fragments. You wake when someone moves to feed the fire. You wake when an unfamiliar sound breaks the night's pattern. At one point, you wake simply because your body is not accustomed to sleeping without a stable surface. Each time you wake, you listen before closing your eyes again. This pattern repeats until the sky begins to lighten. By what you estimate as the second morning, your entire body feels used in ways it rarely is in modern life. Your calves are tight.
Your lower back aches. Your hands are stiff. Even your mind feels fatigued from continuous alertness. Yet the day begins again without pause. There is no concept of taking a morning off. Survival tasks resume as naturally as breathing. You might be asked to help gather more fuel immediately, before breakfast of any kind exists. Moving again so soon after poor sleep feels heavier than yesterday. You realize quickly that energy debt accumulates. Modern life often allows recovery, weekends, rest days, controlled nutrition. Here, recovery is partial at best. You begin to understand how long-term survival depends on pacing effort, not exhausting yourself in any single task. As the morning air warms slightly, insects begin to appear. Not overwhelming, but persistent enough to notice.
You brush them away occasionally. Smoke from the fire helps but does not eliminate them entirely. Your skin, already irritated from friction and exposure, becomes more sensitive. Hygiene here is functional rather than cosmetic. Hands are rinsed in water. Dirt remains embedded under nails. Despite this, you notice patterns that reduce risk. Washing after handling raw meat, avoiding contamination of water sources. These practices exist without written rules. They are memory encoded in behavior. At some point, you may be shown how to prepare plant fibers into simple cordage.
Twisting strands together requires patience and consistent tension. Your first attempts unravel easily. Hands that are already sore struggle with the fine motor control required. Yet even a short length of usable cord is valuable, binding tools, securing materials. You begin to see how even small manufactured items in modern life, string, tape, containers, represent enormous hidden labor when produced without industry.
Time moves again according to necessity. If weather shifts, clouds gathering, wind strengthening, priorities change quickly. Shelter may need reinforcement, loose materials secured, fuel moved undercover. Rain is not an inconvenience that ruins plans. It is a force that can erase heat, soak clothing, and increase risk of illness. You help reposition branches, pressing them into place. Your arms tremble from accumulated fatigue. Still, the work continues until the immediate threat is reduced. If rain begins lightly, the smell of wet earth intensifies. Smoke behaves differently, flattening under heavier air. You discover how difficult it is to keep flame alive when everything around you grows damp. Someone adjusts the arrangement of wood, shielding embers from droplets. The process is delicate, patient. If the fire survives, relief is visible even without words. Throughout the day, you become increasingly aware that your modern sense of time efficiency does not fully apply here. Tasks are not rushed beyond what conditions allow. Hurrying often creates mistakes, broken tools, wasted effort, injury. Precision matters more than speed. As afternoon returns again, your body enters a strange equilibrium. You are tired, but also more attuned. Your eyes notice movement at the edge of vision more quickly. Your ears distinguish between wind and leaves and something heavier. Your steps become quieter, not from expertise, but from necessity. You begin adapting, even within this short span. Emotionally, something shifts as well. Small successes feel significant. A flame catching quickly, a tool working as intended, a patch of edible plants discovered nearby. These moments produce genuine satisfaction. Modern achievements often exist in abstract spaces, numbers on screens, completed forms. Here, outcomes are tangible. You either have warmth or you do not. You either have food or you continue searching. As the second evening approaches, the sky transitions again toward deeper color. Fatigue deepens into a dull heaviness behind your eyes. You sit near the fire once more, feeling heat against your legs. Smoke drifts past your face. Your body smells of sweat, earth, and wood. You realize that if you had arrived with expectations of constant danger or cinematic adventure, the reality is different. The greatest challenge has been endurance, continuous, practical work, without the cushion of guaranteed comfort. If someone were to ask you now whether you could survive a single additional day, your answer might be more cautious than confident. You have not faced catastrophic events, no major injury, no severe weather, no starvation. And yet, even under relatively stable conditions, the effort required has been relentless. You begin to imagine what happens when variables worsen: a sudden storm lasting multiple days, an injury that limits mobility, a failed hunt combined with scarce plant food. The margin for error shrinks quickly. At the same time, you also recognize that the people who lived entire lives in this environment were not constantly on the edge of collapse. They possessed knowledge that you lack. Their bodies were conditioned from childhood. Their expectations matched reality. What feels extreme to you was normal rhythm to them. As darkness settles again, you feel sleep pulling at you earlier than before. Your muscles surrender to exhaustion more readily. Even the hard ground begins to feel slightly more tolerable, not because it changed, but because you did. Before your eyes close, you listen to the fire crackle softly. You think about how, in your usual life, warmth appears instantly at the turn of a dial. Here, warmth is maintained through continuous effort. If you last through the night again, you will have experienced something rare for a modern person:
2 full cycles where survival depended directly on your actions and the knowledge of those around you. Could you truly live here long-term?
The honest answer remains uncertain. Adaptation is possible. Humans are remarkably flexible. But adaptation requires humility, learning, and time. Dropped suddenly into this world, you might survive a day, perhaps several. But doing so comfortably, confidently, without constant strain, that would take far longer than a single sunrise and sunset. As the fire's glow flickers against the surrounding darkness and the sounds of the night settle into a rhythm that no longer feels entirely alien, you drift towards sleep with a deeper understanding of how fragile modern convenience truly is.
The question that began as a simple thought experiment, could you survive one day, now feels less like a challenge and more like a quiet measure of perspective. Because survival here was never about dramatic heroism. It was about patience, attention, shared effort. There was a moment, sometime after you have already learned how heavy a simple branch can feel after hours of carrying it, when the world begins to look less like a landscape and more like a network of decisions. Every direction you face presents a different set of possibilities, and each possibility contains both risk and potential relief. You begin to notice that nothing in this environment is neutral. Even standing still is a choice that costs warmth, attention, and time. If you were asked to walk toward the edge of a clearing alone, you would feel the difference immediately. When others are nearby, their presence distributes responsibility. Alone, every sound seems amplified. The rustle of tall grass carries an edge that did not exist when you were part of a group. Your senses, sharpened by necessity, start interpreting subtle changes you might have ignored in your ordinary life. A shift in bird calls, a sudden silence where there had been constant background noise, the direction of wind against your cheek. Silence, especially, becomes meaningful. In modern settings, silence often suggests calm. Here, silence might mean that something else has entered the area, something that other animals are already aware of. You pause without being told. You listen. Your breathing slows because even your own exhale sounds too loud. After several seconds, the forest resumes its quiet rhythm. The tension releases gradually rather than all at once. You continue moving, but now with an awareness that your presence is not hidden simply because you cannot see anyone watching. This awareness follows you through the remainder of the day.
If you are tasked with collecting smaller materials, dry grasses, thin twigs, you quickly discover that not everything that looks dry actually is. Material that snaps cleanly is valuable. Material that bends slightly without breaking may still hold moisture. Your fingers test texture repeatedly. You gather a bundle, but even this small task takes longer than expected. The ground is uneven. Your balance shifts constantly. You must remain aware of where your feet land while also scanning for useful resources. Modern multitasking often involves screens and information streams. Here, multitasking is physical awareness layered over environmental observation. Your shoulders begin to feel the repetitive motion of bending and lifting. It is not dramatic pain, but a steady reminder that your body is being used continuously. At some point, the sky shifts in a way that suggests changing weather. Clouds gather, not in the towering formations that immediately signal a storm, but in a gradual thickening that dims sunlight. Someone notices long before you do. You follow their gaze upward.
The change is subtle, yet it triggers a shift in activity. More fuel is gathered. Loose materials are moved closer to shelter. Time that might have been spent searching further is redirected towards securing what already exists. Preparation here is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, preventative. If wind increases even slightly, you feel how quickly exposed skin cools. The hide around your shoulders flutters. You adjust it instinctively, pulling it tighter. The group's movement becomes more compact. People remain within closer distance of one another, not out of fear, but efficiency. Shared heat, shared awareness. If rain begins, even lightly, the scent of the world changes immediately. Soil releases a deep, mineral smell.
Leaves darken. Your footing becomes less reliable. Mud forms in patches that did not exist minutes earlier.
You step carefully, testing each placement before committing weight. A single slip here could mean more than embarrassment. Even a minor fall could create injury that lingers without treatment. Back near shelter, you notice how quickly tasks reorganize under shifting conditions. Someone shields the fire with their body, while another adjusts fuel placement. The flame sputters briefly. Smoke thickens. Your eyes sting. Yet you remain close, understanding that losing the fire entirely would cost far more effort later. You attempt to assist by placing smaller twigs near the embers. Your timing is slightly off. A twig smothers a fragile spark. Another hand moves gently, repositioning it without frustration. Correction here is immediate but not harsh. Energy is not wasted on blame. The flame recovers. You exhale without realizing you had been holding your breath. As rain passes or weakens, the air grows colder. Moisture clings to everything. Your clothing, already imperfect insulation, now feels heavier. You shift closer to the fire again. Steam rises faintly from damp surfaces. Even warmth now requires patience.
You cannot rush dryness. While waiting, you observe more closely how tools are maintained. A stone edge is inspected, rotated against light. A small flake is removed to sharpen it again. Bindings made from plant fiber are retightened. Every object receives attention because replacement is never guaranteed. In your usual life, a dull knife is an inconvenience solved by purchasing another. Here, the tool itself represents hours, sometimes days, of effort. You begin to feel a subtle shift in how you perceive objects. Nothing is disposable. Even a broken fragment might be reshaped into something else. As evening approaches once more, food preparation begins again with whatever resources were secured earlier. If only a small amount of meat exists, it is divided carefully. You notice how distribution happens without visible calculation devices. Experience guides proportion. Each person receives enough to sustain, not enough to indulge. You chew slowly, aware that every calorie matters.
The taste is intense. Smoke, fat, and the faint metallic hint of cooked muscle. There is no seasoning beyond fire itself, yet hunger sharpens appreciation. Nearby, someone cracks a bone open with controlled force. The sound is sharp. Inside, marrow is extracted and consumed. Nothing is wasted. You realize how much nutritional value modern habits routinely discard. As darkness spreads again, the fire's glow becomes central. Your body, now familiar with the cycle, begins preparing for sleep even before you consciously decide. Yet tonight, a new discomfort appears. A blister formed earlier on your heel has grown tender. Each step you took during the afternoon aggravated it. Now, resting, you feel its presence more clearly. There are no cushioned shoes waiting for tomorrow. No antiseptic ointment. You examine it under dim light. Someone nearby notices and gestures, perhaps suggesting adjustment of your foot wrapping. A strip of material is repositioned.
Pressure is redistributed. It is not perfect, but it helps. This small interaction reminds you again that survival here is not solitary. Knowledge is shared through action. You lie down again on uneven ground. Your body finds a position slightly faster than the previous night. Adaptation, even minimal, is occurring. Sleep arrives in fragments again, but deeper between interruptions. At some point in the night, a sudden sound, louder than usual, cuts through the darkness. You wake instantly. Your heart pounds. A branch snaps somewhere beyond a firelight. Others are already awake. No one moves abruptly. Instead, attention focuses outward. Another sound follows, rustling, heavier movement. You hold still, barely breathing. Moments stretch. Then the sound fades. Whatever passed chose not to approach further. Gradually, bodies relax again.
Someone feeds the fire. The flame brightens slightly. You realize that fear here is not theatrical. It is controlled, measured. Energy is conserved, even in tension. When morning returns again,
Your mind carries the memory of that nighttime disturbance. You are more alert as you rise. The air feels colder than the previous day. Perhaps clouds remain. You stand slowly, testing your foot. The blister protests but holds. Movement will be possible. The day begins with familiar tasks: fuel, water, observation, but your perception has changed. What felt alien yesterday now feels recognizable, though still difficult. You notice how the group checks the surrounding area before committing to longer movement. Tracks near camp are examined. You crouch beside them. The impressions are fresh enough to hold shape. You cannot identify them. Others exchange brief gestures. A decision is made, perhaps to avoid that direction for now. Risk assessment is constant. You begin to understand that knowledge of danger is as valuable as knowledge of food. As you move again across the landscape, you pay closer attention to plant life. Leaves with certain shapes, berries with specific colors.
You remember seeing some gathered previously. You attempt to identify them again. Recognition is partial. Your memory struggles to retain details without repeated exposure. This highlights how deeply experiential learning is embedded in this world. Books do not exist to reference later. Mistakes must be avoided before they happen. You gather what you believe is the correct plant. An experienced hand examines it, then nods slightly. Approval is quiet, but meaningful. Your contribution, though small, adds to the group's resources. A brief sense of accomplishment surfaces. As the sun rises higher, heat increases slightly. Your body begins to sweat again, despite fatigue. You adjust clothing, balancing warmth and ventilation. Hydration becomes more important. You drink carefully. The water tastes different each time. Minerals, organic traces. No two sources are identical. Your stomach accepts it, but you remain aware that not every source would be safe. If the day includes an attempt to fish, perhaps at a shallow stream, you observe another form of patience. Standing still near water, watching for movement beneath the surface. The reflection of light makes it difficult to see clearly. You try to focus.
Your legs begin to ache from remaining motionless. Minutes pass. Suddenly, someone moves with swift precision. A sharpened implement enters the water. Sometimes it succeeds. Sometimes it does not. If a small fish is caught, the reward feels immediate. A new source of food, however modest. If you are invited to try, your timing is likely off. The fish vanishes before you react. You realize how much practice is required for even this simple act. By midday, clouds may break, allowing sunlight to warm surfaces again. Steam rises faintly from damp ground. Your clothing dries unevenly. The relief is noticeable. You sit briefly near the water's edge. Your reflection looks unfamiliar. Hair disordered, skin marked with dirt and small scratches. You recognize yourself, yet also see how quickly environment reshapes appearance. Modern grooming routines vanish within a day. Physical presentation becomes secondary to function. As afternoon continues, tool repair or creation may take priority again. You watch as fibers are twisted into longer cordage.
Your fingers, though sore, attempt the motion again. This time, the strands hold slightly better. Incremental improvement feels significant. Every skill gained reduces future effort. If weather remains stable, the group may range slightly further than before, confident in returning before dark. You walk across terrain that shifts from soft soil to scattered rock. Your foot wrapping holds, though discomfort persists. You learn to place weight more on the outer edge to reduce pressure. Adaptation continues through necessity. At one point, you stop near a patch of exposed stone. Someone selects a piece and tests its fracture pattern. A sharp strike produces a clean flake. You hear the distinct sound, a crisp, controlled snap. The resulting edge is examined, then handed to you. You hold it carefully. It is sharper than expected. You feel both respect and caution. Even simple materials can become precise tools. As evening approaches yet again, the sky transitions through muted colors. Your body anticipates the cycle: fire, food, rest. Tasks repeat, but your perception of them has evolved. What once felt overwhelming now feels structured.
Still demanding, still tiring, but understandable. Food is prepared once more.
This time you assist more confidently, positioning pieces near heat without smothering flame. Your earlier mistake informs your actions. Learning is immediate and practical. As you eat, you notice how your appetite has adjusted. You are satisfied with less than you would normally consider a meal. Your body has recalibrated expectations. Night falls again. The darkness beyond the fire no longer feels entirely alien, though it remains formidable. You listen to distant sounds with less immediate panic. Your breathing remains steady. Sleep approaches. Before closing your eyes, you reflect, though perhaps not in words, on how quickly your priorities have shifted. Comfort has been replaced by continuity. Luxury has been replaced by adequacy. If warmth, food, and safety persist through the night, the day is considered successful. Lying on the ground once more, you notice that your body settles faster than before. The hardness has not changed.